I spent 26 years in the Navy flying fighters off of aircraft carriers. And during that time, I had the great privilege to also be an instructor pilot at Top Gun, as well as being the flight leader of the Blue Angels. After I left active duty and started working in the business world, as I met folks, they were intrigued about how did we train, how did we operate, how did we lead in the Navy. And so I've been speaking to groups literally all over the country since then, just sharing what lessons I learned along the way.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
You live your best audacious life ever. It's certainly a pleasure to have you here with us today, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us by checking out the podcast. Now, trust in leadership is like the sturdy anchor of a ship, keeping it steady in turbulent waters. And just like our guest today, Captain George Dom, he relies on trust to navigate his crew through challenges. Trust is essential for effective leadership in any setting. Now, Captain George Dom is the founder of the High Trust Leadership Network. He's a former naval officer and aviator with a career spanning several years in key leadership roles in high-performance organizations. His leadership style is rooted in trust, communication, a deep understanding of the people around him. Captain George's expertise in leadership and trust making the perfect fit for today's episode, where we delve deep into the importance of trust in leadership and how it can shape our lives. So now that we've got the table all set, let's check out what Captain George has to say. Enjoy. Greetings, it's Captain George Dom joining me on the Audacious Living Podcast. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. You know, we truly spend much time on this podcasting, encouraging individuals to live their best audacious lives ever. And as we move through this world, we know that there's all sorts of things that will happen that will challenge us and perhaps make our way more difficult. But we still have to perverse ahead. And you've sort of had an illustrious career as in the high areas, I was going to say, in high performance organizations and leadership positions, really helping people and working with teams and working with groups and building trust, which I know is a big piece of what you do as well. So maybe as a starting point for our listeners, if I can get you to talk a little bit about the work that you do and what's brought you up to this point.
Yeah, sure. You bet. So I spent 26 years in the Navy flying fighters off of aircraft carriers. And during that time, I had the great privilege to also be an instructor pilot at Top Gun, as well as being the flight leader of the Blue Angels. My final operational assignment was as the Air Wing commander on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy, which includes 2,500 personnel and about 70 aircraft. After I left active duty and started working in the business world, as I met folks, they were intrigued about how did we train, how did we operate, how did we lead in the Navy. And so I've been speaking to groups literally all over the country since then, just sharing what lessons I learned along the way. And my takeaway is that the lessons I have to share come from operating in some really extreme environments on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, going into combat, and so forth, and flying literally several feet apart from my wingmen at very low altitude and high speed doing jet formation aerobatics with the Blue Angels. And some of your listeners may say, well, okay, but that's not, the environment that I live and work in. So, but my lesson is that, when you're operating in extreme environments like that, we are no different than anybody else, but in those environments, you can't compromise. You have to figure out what works, and then you have to stick to it because the consequences are just so severe. So I'd like to think that if I can share some lessons that I learned in those environments that are universal principles that literally apply everywhere, that if your listeners will take one or two of them and apply them, I think they can make a difference.
Got you. So maybe let's start there. Some of these lessons, because I do appreciate the fact that you highlighted that the environments are different, but despite that, that still doesn't mean there's things that we can take away for ourselves. So we're the vast majority of our listeners, and myself included, will not be in a fighter plane in the skies.
Right.
But it doesn't mean we can't walk away with a lesson.
Right. So, I learned very early on as a young pilot that, there's an old saying that if you really want to go fast, then go alone. But if
Mm-hmm.
you want to go far and you want to have significant achievement and lasting significance, you have to go as a team. And I think if you look around, even folks in sports and so forth that are in individual sports, they all have a team around them that helps support them. So we never really go anywhere very far without the support of other people in a team environment. And so, that's where I talk to folks about how do you build and operate a successful team, a high
Mm-hmm.
performing team.
Yep.
And there's a lot that goes into it, of course, and we all learn those types of lessons in sports and a variety of other activities. But when I look back on my career, um, and I think about some of the really intense situations I was in with a team, um, the one thing that made all the difference for us was the ability to build and sustain a high level of trust
Mm.
among members of the team. It's really foundational. If you don't have that, your team is not going to be as successful as it could be. Um, and so, and if you think about it, regardless of where occupation you're in or whatever, it's all about relationships. It's all
Yes.
about how we interact with other people, and trust is really the psychological air that all relationships breathe. And whenever the trust is high and the air is clear, the relationship is strong and it's dynamic and agile and it's just great. But when the trust is not there, things slow down, it gets dark, it gets painful, and it's just a miserable way to go. So that's what I like to, as a fundamental lesson to share with people is um, as I look back on particularly with my 2 years with the Blue Angels,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned early on that, I could have a good day and my team might have an average day, but my team would never have a great day if I, as the flight leader flying in the number one jet,
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a great day. And I never forgot the 2 years that I was wearing a blue suit and going to air shows and being a rock star. Um, Every day, though, I remember the tragedy that befell the Air Force demonstration team, the Thunderbirds.
Right.
And years ago, they were doing a formation loop in training.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're flying 2 feet apart from another jet at very low altitude and dynamics, the wingmen, they're not looking around enjoying the scenery. They are totally focused
Right.
on hot piece of metal that's 2 feet away from their head, right? And on this day, the leader in this looping maneuver didn't pull out in time to make the bottom of the loop. And they put 4 T-38 fighters symmetrically spaced into the desert floor, killing all 4 pilots.
Mm.
So that's the reality that I was operating in. If our team wanted to be successful as a Blue Angel team, uh, we had to figure out, what's it going to take for us to build a level of trust where, everybody coming to work, I had to figure out, what do I have to do so that these folks will come to work every day and enthusiastically literally put their life in my hands.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't smart enough to figure it all out ahead of time. But when I look back on the 2 years that I flew, and when you get a chance to fly with the Blue Angels, it's a 2-year assignment,
Mhm.
in your Navy or Marine Corps career. And we flew about 70 cities, 150 air shows, flying 6 days a week, for 11 and a half months of the year. And we did it safely, and we had just an amazing experience. And when I look back on that, I realized there were 5 things that I had to pay attention to in
Okay.
order to earn that incredible level of trust. And you had to pay attention to all 5. If I dropped one out, we would have had a setback. But the good news is that when you pay attention to one, it reinforces the other 4, so you have this upward spiral of trust and confidence. And if you don't mind, I'll go through them
Yes,
very,
please.
and then you can drill
Yeah,
down on
sure.
whatever one interests you. But they're all based on the axiom, in order to be trusted, you must be trustworthy. You see,
Yes.
it can't be bought, it can't be demanded, it can't be expected, it can't be coerced. It's a gift. And it's a gift that's given whenever you earn it, and you have to earn it literally, every single day. And for each one of these 5 principles, there was a question that my team was asking about me. And depending upon to what answer they got, they would make a judgment to how much they trusted me. And for your listeners, I believe these are the same 5 questions the people on their teams are asking about them, as well as their friends in the community and their families as well.
Mhm.
So the first one was character. And the
Yes.
question was simply, do you walk your talk? Do you keep your promises? Do you live up to your obligations? Do you live our shared values? And in the Navy and Marine Corps, we had 3 core values: honor, courage, and commitment. And
Yeah.
my team was judging me by to what degree did I live up to that, and did I perform my responsibilities as the flight leader and commanding officer. The second one is commitment. And my team was absolutely convinced from the very first day we were together that I was going to show up to lead them with a smile on my face when the sun was shining and the sky was blue and the air was smooth. But they knew that during our time together, there were going to be some storms, both literally and figuratively. And what they wanted to know is, are you going to be with us when the going gets rough? When we have to take a punch, are you going to show up as our leader? And not only show up, but are you going to bring your A game and lead us through the storm to success on the other side? Because if you're just going to show up and
Right.
take names, cast blame, point
Yep.
fingers, CYA, forget about it. What they want is, am I going to be the best leader
Yeah.
that I can be? And we can talk about,
And that's a big one, George. It really, really is. I mean, I'm surprised that you didn't have one first, because it arguably that could have been the very first principle, right? Because the big
yeah,
one.
yeah, you have to be all in. And we can talk about, if, what does it take to develop that level of commitment? The third one is the one we typically think about when we're making a trust decision, particularly at work, whether it's a hiring a decision, a promotion, or whatever. And that's competence. How good is this person at whatever skills they need to have to fulfill their role? Where did they go to school? What kind of training? What kind of experience have they had? And it is absolutely important, no question about it. But I put it third for a reason, Because I believe that if you don't get the first two, the character and the commitment, the competence doesn't really matter. It's the old toxicity of the expert, the person who's really good at what they do, but man, they are painful to be around, and everybody's
Right.
got to walk on eggshells and
Right.
so forth. But if you can get the first two, if somebody walks their talk and shares our values and they are all in,
Mm.
you can, I mean, they have to have a certain amount of skill level, of course, but you can pretty much teach them. And with the Blue Angels and at Top Gun, if we had two pilots that were very, very close,
Yep.
we would pick the one, and if necessary, trade off a little bit of skill in order to be absolutely sure we got the
Mm.
character and the commitment.
Sure. Sure.
That was-
Well, the skill you can build on, right? The skill you can always improve on and get better. I mean, even the top pilots, they don't stop building their skills because they think we're here. They keep
That's right.
building. But like I do like your point around the character because that's huge.
In fact, uh, when it got down to the crunch, and of course, we had some amazing people apply for the team, and we would be ones that would be picking our relief. It's unusual in the military, but we got to pick, at Top Gun and the Blue Angels, who was going to come in there. And when we got down to the crunch and you had to make final decisions between a couple, three really talented people, the question we would ask ourselves is, which one of these three is going to come to work every day and accept positive, constructive criticism
Mhm.
without getting defensive or discouraged in order to continue to improve every day, just like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And we can talk about that because a key part of our process for becoming masters in the jet was a debrief ritual process that we was sacred to us, and we can talk about that one some.
what does that look like? Let's talk about that.
Sure. So after every flight,
Hmm.
and we flew 100 flights in training from January to March to get the ready for the air show season.
Yep.
And then we flew 6 days a week, whether in training or during the air shows. And after every flight, without fail, we always had a debrief. And here's how it worked.
Okay.
We would go into the conference room after the flight. And when you walked in, you figuratively took off your rank,
Okay.
and we all came in as one team, and everybody's input and performance is valued. Um, of course, we had to hold ourselves to making it professional, but everybody was expected to contribute and had an important role to play. We didn't have any hangers on like friends or whatever. You had to be somebody who was actually involved in the flight in order to get in the room, because we didn't want anybody holding back because they didn't know, okay, who's this guy over here? I don't know, we had to have absolute candor in the debrief as we tried to discern what happened out there, good and bad. And nobody has the full picture. Everybody has something to contribute. I mean, how many times have you come out of a meeting and you heard something completely different or in addition to what other people heard, right? So
Mm.
first of all, everybody takes a turn in contributing to what happened. And then once we get that clearly understood, then we talk about, okay, the good stuff, why did that happen? Because we want to reinforce that. And the stuff that we could do better, we wanted to identify that. And what are the things we need to do to take it on board for tomorrow and not have it reoccur?
Mhm.
So, and it's pretty powerful. And you may find it interesting that I, as the leader, I start out the debrief
Okay.
and I make a few general comments about, how the flight went.
Yep.
And then I would list every significant mistake that I was aware of that I made.
Ah, wow.
This did a couple things for us. First of all, it set the example that, hey, mistakes are going to happen. We're human, right? And as long as you recognize them and own it and take responsibility for it and don't let it happen, multiple times. As long as it's not negligent, we're okay with that. And we'll keep building and getting better. The other thing it does is it allowed my wingman to get an idea to what degree was I aware of my own performance. Because if I'm making mistakes and I don't realize it, we got a problem. If I'm making mistakes and I won't admit it, we got another problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I would set the tone by that. And then the number 2 pilot, number 3, 4, we go around the room for all 6 of the pilots, as well as the support officers who had roles in the air show as well. We would all take turns sharing, here are the mistakes I made, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to talking about them. And, and that was what the debrief then went down into the details.
I, re-
So
I really loved how the debrief takes away the hierarchy and and has everyone at the same level. I think that's so important. Oftentimes when you've got your boss, manager, leader, and say in these types of forums, there's always this hesitation, right? Because this person's up here and I'm not. But when you come down to the level, and even come down sounds hierarchical, but if at equal level playing field, if you will, I think it allows, so we talk about trust, right? It allows for that trust to really, really flow.
yeah, trust at its foundational level is, there's a lot of definitions for it, but really for me, what it means is a willingness to be vulnerable. And when I, as the leader, are willing to be vulnerable in front of my team, then they realize that they can be vulnerable and they can share and it's safe. And we're all in
Yes.
this together.
Safe is a great word.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very powerful, and what comes out of that is really a very strong sense of ownership. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody feels like it's my team, and I'm responsible for it, and I'm here to contribute everything I can to making it successful.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. The idea, and actually, before I go, I want to actually, if we can go back, if you don't mind, George, because I really like
Oh,
to get a sense of your
sure.
sort of your leadership journey, if you will,
Uh-huh.
and really wanting to be able to understand at what point did these realizations come to you?
Well, I was really fortunate along the way because we all make mistakes and we learn
Yes.
from our mistakes, right? That's where the learning occurs. But I worked for some really terrific folks along the way. Some are better than others, of course, but I had some great folks, and they were. I remember one of them for sure. I had a tough situation, and in my view, I failed. I failed the team, but he wouldn't let me feel like a failure.
Right.
He would, he would make sure I understood what the truth was. But hey, we're getting on, we're getting going, and so it's. And like I said before, all along the environment was just very intense. And so you either figured this stuff out or you were going to be gone because we just couldn't afford to have anybody on board who didn't develop a high level of trust. Right.
Got you. Got you. Um, Wondering, when you landed or the realization of the importance of trust, was it was like an epiphany moment, or when did you kind of there was something that was developed, or how did that come to be for you?
You know, it was an epiphany for me after the fact as I look back on it, and I wanted to
Mm.
share things with people that they maybe don't hear from anybody else. Because you hear a
Right.
lot about leadership and teamwork, and there's a lot of people out there, but there really aren't very many that are talking about. And when I look back on throughout my career, I mean, that was sort of the unspoken foundation. And some people, I talked to type A personalities,
Yeah.
particularly these really aggressive sales guys in the financial services industry and so
Okay.
forth. And I get up and I start talking about trust, and I can see their eyes start to roll back in their head a little bit because they're thinking, "Oh man, this really sounds touchy-feely. This is like some kind of HR thing," and And I tell you, every high performance team I've been on, and as I look around at other ones, whether it's in sports or in the military, uh, just about any high performance team, trust isn't something that's just nice to have when you put talented people together.
Yes.
For us, it was a strategic imperative. We recruited for trustworthiness. We trained to build it every day. We didn't talk about it in those terms, but the reality was, hey, if you weren't somebody that people could depend on when you
Yeah.
got fired off the front end of the carrier, you were gonna, there was gonna be some consequences to that. So we recruited for it. If you got it, you got rewarded and promoted. And if you lost it and couldn't get it back quickly, you were sidelined or you were gone because there was just no compromise on that.
How do you train for trust?
Well, like I say, each of these five, and let me give you number 4 and number 5 quickly,
Okay.
and then
Yeah,
we can
right.
talk about how you train to them. But so number 4 is the one I think that a lot of leaders today are missing because we are all operating in a, excuse me about that.
Nice. Nice.
We're all operating in a Mach 2 world. I mean,
Okay.
we're going fast, 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 and we've got these to-do lists a mile long, and we're just trying to be as efficient and productive as we can be. And I think Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has it right when he says that you can be efficient with things, but you can't be efficient with people. And if you want to connect with people, and the question on my team was asking about me was, or I had to ask myself was, do they believe I understand them?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a different question than do I believe I understand them? Because what I believe is interesting, but not sufficient. What matters is what do they believe? And when they believe you get them, that you understand what their challenges are, what their goals are, what their hopes, what their fears, then they will come along because they know that when you're making the decisions, you're taking them into account. And so they will join up and come along. But if they don't believe you understand what they're facing, what they're up to, what they're being asked to do, what challenges and barriers they're having to overcome, then they figure, hey, and we've all seen it, right? At the water cooler, hey, the boss, what was that all about? He doesn't get it. He doesn't know what we're doing down here on the front lines. And so uh, by the middle of the season, my team, we've got so connected that I could literally do just about anything with that formation. If I needed to speed the roll to keep us underneath some clouds, I could do it. If I had to pull harder at the bottom of a loop to avoid a bridge or a ridge line, I could do it. If I
Right.
needed to tighten the turn around a skyscraper, I could do it. My wingman would be right there with me because they knew that before I did anything, I was taking into account what I was going to be asking them to do. So that's connection. And then the final one, if connection is about do they believe I understand them, then the final one is communication. Do they understand me? Am I speaking clearly, concisely, directly in order
Yep.
to cut through all the chaff and all the distractions? Am I speaking consistently and with enough frequency that the message will settle in? Because the biggest challenge for leaders with communication is the presumption that it's occurred.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I
Yeah.
sent the email, they get it. I
Yeah.
gave the speech, they get it.
They heard
I
it.
had the talk, she gets it. They don't get it, at
Right.
least not yet anyway. And you have to transmit in a consistent way over a period of time. And then you have to have a mechanism where you verify that the message you transmitted was the one that was received.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in aviation, we have some very specific protocols. If I'm flying and the air traffic controller gives me a new altitude assignment
Yep.
or a new routing assignment, I have to read that back verbatim so that there's no doubt that I heard what the controller said.
Right.
And that's a good lesson for the rest of us. I mean, we need to have something in mind to avoid misunderstandings. So those are the five, what I call the 5 C's of trustworthiness.
You know that fifth C there, communication, another big one. They're all big, George, but that certainly is a big one because the communication really helps set the stage. You know, if your message cannot be communicated effectively, and then you also have to think, and I'm sure you could speak to this, where you're in, high pressure situations where maybe the time to take the time to communicate isn't always there, right? It's so important that that message is delivered. So I love the fact that you're able to have a mechanism to evaluate it or to make sure that the message has been heard.
Right. And if you have the time, uh, you want to invest in your team along the way so that when you do communicate something that is timely and you don't have time to explain it, you've invested to the point. Again, this goes back to the connection. They know you get them. So you sometimes you have to make things happen very quickly, and then you backfill after the fact. You explain the specifics of why, hey, we needed to pivot really quickly there and take action without a lot of explanation.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a wonderful thing, and I love the framework in terms of how you got that laid out for people. George, I gotta tell you, man, I can tell that you're really passionate about your work and that you love what you do. Um, I often talk about when I have the conversation about leadership, and I got to tell you, leadership by far is one of the things I love talking about the most because of the ability it has to impact people in really profound ways. But one of the things that I've talked on this podcast before, if you line 10 people up and I'll ask them, what is leadership to you, you'll probably get 10 different responses,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
that's
sure.
how impactful leadership is. And so certainly I can hear it from you that you deeply have appreciation for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I believe that, leaders come in all shapes, all sizes, all temperaments, all backgrounds. But three things that all leaders have in common are, number one, they have a vision of
Mhm.
where they want to take the organization, including themselves, you know, um, they get a very clear picture of it. Now they may develop that vision differently. It's not necessarily, inspirational that I
Yep.
get it all. You have a great team of people. You're willing to listen,
Yep.
and over time you cobble together. But you get a very clear idea of where you're going. And then they have a unwillingness to accept the status quo. We are not staying here. We are going forward, and we're going to some place that we've never been. See, I differentiate in my own way leadership from management. Management is about taking a situation, a process, whatever, and trying to make it as good as you can, trying to make it as efficient and productive and so forth. Leadership is all about going someplace new. We're gonna and therefore leadership is all about change, right? But what comes with whenever an organization is undergoing significant change, what always accompanies that is a level of anxiety and fear. People wonder, oh, whoa, can we really do this? Or do they really mean it this time? Or is it just another flavor of the month? What does that mean for me? And what does that mean for my colleagues? And so forth. And so the third thing is that the leader has the influence to bring the team with them, right? That leader has invested in his team or her team over time such that they overcome this fear and anxiety by going, I don't know, but I believe in him or her, and I'm coming along. Let's go. Let's see if we can make this happen. And so, but there's all different ways to do it, right? We've all seen
Sure.
that. There's no one way.
I remember the very first time that I really grasp to understand what leadership was. And I told this story. I tell a lot of stories on this podcast. I repeat myself a lot, but I'm going to do it again
Okay.
because I like the story.
I haven't heard it.
Yeah, it's first time for you. So there we go. I must have been 12 or 13 years old, and my mom used to send us on summer day camps. We went on these day camp trips, and so we'd have these, excursions across the city. I'm in Toronto, so go around downtown Toronto and visit buildings and landmarks and all different things. And in our group, in the day camp, there was kids all different ages. And for whatever reason, there was this young little boy that gravitated to me, and he always wanted to hold my hand, and wherever I went, he wanted to come with me. And I remember one of the leaders, the camp counselors, said to me, "You're going to make a great leader one day." And in that moment, I had no concept of what she was talking about. To me, I
Mhm.
felt like I was babysitting a kid. That's what it felt like, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was much more than that. And it wasn't until years later when I started to understand leadership a lot better. It took me back to that instance. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like we're guiding people. That young man, little boy, he wanted me to guide him because he trusted me enough
Yep.
that I would take him. We had that connection that I would
Yep.
take him to where he needed to go, and he'd be okay. And everything that you said, it just rings true for me more and more. This is what we're talking when we talk about leadership.
Yeah. You made him feel safe that he was going someplace new, but he knew if as long as he held on to your hand, he was going to be okay.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
great
no,
leader.
yeah, no, again, in the moment, I had no idea what it was. I couldn't, I had no concept. Like I said, I was babysitting, man. So
That's a wonderful story.
yeah,
Very good.
thank you. Um, so the piece about the trust in high trust environments and I guess in high trust leadership, if you will, um, well, I mean, even in general, trust is one of those things that's really hard to build but easy to break.
Oh yeah.
Um, can we talk about rebuilding trust and what that looks like? And is it even possible? Like if you're in this high, okay, you're in the air in high pressure, dangerous environments, and you don't have trust. How do you build it back in those types of
Yeah.
environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's when people typically think about trust. They don't think about it proactively like I'm encouraging. They think about it after it's broken and then they try to figure out how to get it back.
Mm,
A couple thoughts are, you know, you might imagine that when you go out and fly 3, 4, 500 miles an hour at very low altitude, very close to people, every now and then you'll have what we call a significant emotional event where somebody just gets the bejesus scared out of them, right? And so then we come back in the flight debrief, and at that very initial part that I described, we have to get that out on the table because no learning is going to happen if somebody is just, emotionally uh, frightened and upset, right? And we've been in meetings like that, right? Where people and if you don't deal with that, then nothing good is going to happen after that. So we would take whatever time it took to get it all out on the table. And then the key for somebody, though, the short answer to, somebody who's broken trust or is you have to own it.
right,
And how many times do we hear public figures who get caught doing, breaking trust, and they try to deflect it, they try to deny it, they try to attack the person who's bringing them, the truth. So first of all, you got to own it, and then you have to express that in a way that, apologize in a genuine, authentic way so that the people that feel like they were betrayed or their trust was violated, you communicate to them your sincerity that you get it, you own it, and you're going to fix it, right?
right,
But you don't really restore it until you act in a way that you walk your talk, to my number one C there. You Again, going back to Stephen Covey, he says, you can't talk your way out of something that you behaved your way into, right? So those are sort of just the very key elements. And the decision to forgive or to restore trust is not up to you. It's up to the other people. And,
Mm.
and the violation may be so severe
Yep.
that they may not be willing to trust you again. And, you can't really do anything about that. But I would say it's still worth the try. It's
Sure.
worth it to try it. And hopefully you can get it back. But if you can't, that's a possibility.
Yeah, yeah. And also recognize that it is a process, right? It's a process that can take time. I'm so glad that you identified that the other person, that they're the one that's determining, when I feel I can trust you, not when you think I should.
That's
Those are
right.
two different things, night and day,
Right.
right? So
They may not be able to give you the gift again that
that's
they
it.
trust, and that's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. George, this has been great. I really appreciate the insights here. They've been fantastic, and
Sure.
I love the openness to share. Well, one last thing, and more of just my own curiosity. Again, a guy that's never been stepped anywhere close foot to a spider plane. I mean, my terms of reference is like Tom Cruise and Top Gun. That's really the extent of it. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the same for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
I guess my question is did the movies get it right? Like, how close to reality are we talking about here?
Well, for the Top Gun movies, we recognized, as the Navy recognized, it wasn't going to be a documentary,
Right.
right? So there's no Top Gun trophy for individual performance, because it's all about teamwork and the students coming together as a team. Now,
Yep.
the portrayal of how much they wanted to beat the instructors who were simulating the bad
Yeah.
guys,
Yep.
that was real. I mean, they're really trying hard
Right.
to do their very best.
Right.
But some of the volleyball scenes and some of that is a bit Hollywood. But I'll
Sure.
tell you, my favorite part of the first Top Gun movie, and
Mhm.
they also had some of that in the second as well, was the first 10 minutes on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. It's an amazing place that you really can't describe to anybody unless
Like
you get
lots
a
of activity. Like lots of activity.
Oh my goodness. And the neat part is it's a very young crew. The average age on the flight deck is probably 20, 21, 22 years
Wow.
old.
Wow.
And these folks come from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, all religions, everywhere. And they come together under a common mission, shared sacrifice, and a very dangerous environment where they have to look out for each other. And it's just magic. It's great. So I
Mm,
love that part because the young people can point out to their buddies back in high school and so forth. That's what I do for a living.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I guess you're as an instructor, knowing that you've got these young guys gunning for you, that makes you have to be on your game even more, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, and the training is all very specific, right? We start out with a building block approach, and the scenarios are fairly basic in terms of the threats capabilities that we're simulating and so forth. But then as the program goes on, it becomes more and more challenging. And
Yes.
so then the students they need to come up with a good plan to begin with. It's got to be good. It doesn't have to be great, but it's got to be good and solid. And then they have to execute it with discipline. And if they do those two things, then at least they'll survive the mission. If they break down in either one of those, then they're going to be constructively killed in the scenario. And then we'll talk about it in the debrief
Mm,
about how it happened. Because, the idea is we want to fight hard in training, train hard and then fight easy when we get out there and have to do it for real.
right. 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 Wow. Wow. Like I said, George, I really appreciated the insights here. Those 5 C's is the character, commitment, competence, connection, and communication.
You got it.
Right.
Well
So there we
done,
go.
sir. You get
I've always said I've become a better student out of school than when I was in school. So there we go. Just
right.
proved it again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very good.
For our listeners that wanted to learn more about your catch up with your work, where can we send them, George?
I've got a website, www.georgedom.com. And there's there's video clips and other materials that just goes into what I talked about in more detail. And in September, I've got a book coming out on high trust leadership, how to build high performance teams. And that will be another way for them to get more information that I've shared today.
Well, I got to tell you, very much appreciate the focus on trust, or no, high trust. I think it's what I don't want to devalue. It's high trust, and I appreciate the focus on that. I think trust is one of those things that we automatically assume is a given, and to a certain degree, it is. But it always has to be built on. You always have to take care of it, nurture it, ensure that you're giving it room to grow. Because as you mentioned earlier, the key to relationships or high function relationships is that high trust element.
That's right. Exactly right. And we all have people in our lives that we have a really high level of trust in, and you can feel it. It's just wonderful. And so, if they're willing to think about this proactively and try to develop character, commitment, competence, connection, communication, they can have 4, 5, 6 more in their life. And how great would that be?
I love it. I love it. George, thanks for the time. This has been awesome. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the invitation. Take care.
Yes. We're back. We are here on the podcast, and now in my conversation with Captain George, certainly one key takeaway is a vital role that trust plays in effective leadership. It's not just about giving orders. It's about building relationships, fostering communication, and earning the trust of your team to navigate challenges together successfully. If you want to learn more about Captain George or connect with him directly, be sure to check out the contact details provided in the show notes below. He's a wealth of knowledge and experience that certainly can help you guide you on your audacious living journey, or maybe you can learn more about Top Gun. I'm sure he has lots to share. Captain George is currently offering special coaching packages for aspiring leaders looking to enhance their leadership skills. So be sure to check out, the show notes and connect with him for these exclusive offers. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode and found value in our discussion with Captain George, please consider liking, following, subscribing, and sharing if you haven't done those things already, because that's, of course, how this podcast grows, and your support means the world to us as we strive to help you live your most audacious life ever. Thank you so much for being a part of our community, and until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.